Saint Gerard Majella, 1726–1755. Like Saint Joseph of Cupertino, Saint Gerard Majella was often enraptured into remarkable levitations, often being drawn away by God for some distances. It was sufficient for Saint Gerard Majella to think of the perfections of God, to contemplate the mystery of the Most Holy Trinity or that of the Incarnation, to cast his eyes upon a crucifix or a picture of the Blessed Virgin, to be in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament or even some wonder of creation. The following are a few examples. Gerard, intending to spend some days at Oliveto, received hospitality at the house of the Archpriest Don Salvador. One morning, Holy Mass was about to begin, and Gerard, who desired to communicate at it, did not appear. They called him, they knocked at his door, but there was no answer. At last they entered and found the seraphic brother kneeling in ecstasy, a crucifix in his right hand, the left hand laid on his breast, his face pale, his eyes half closed. For more than half an hour, the household of the archpriest gazed in admiration at the ravishing spectacle. This hospitable home had already been witness of a still more remarkable ecstasy, in which the servant of God was suspended without support in the air. It had taken place on the very morning of his arrival at Oliveto. Gerard had withdrawn to his room to pray. At the dinner hour, the archpriest went himself to invite him to dinner. But to his astonishment he found the brother ravished in ecstasy and raised about 3 feet from the ground. Filled with amazement, he withdrew, but returning shortly after, he found him in the same state. The whole household, all witnesses to the extraordinary event, unable to sit down to dinner, awaited the guest with tears of emotion. At last he appeared, his face all inflamed. "Please do not wait for me," he said to the archpriest. "I do not wish to inconvenience you." To preserve the memory of this rapture, the archpriest marked on the wall of the room the height to which he had seen the saint elevated. A similar prodigy was seen by all the people at Corrado. On Good Friday, 1753, a picture representing Jesus Christ crucified was carried in procession. When the procession entered the church of the Benedictines, Gerard was already inside engaged in prayer. As soon as he perceived the sacred image of the Savior, an ecstatic transport seized him, and before the eyes of all, he was elevated to a considerable height from the ground, his eyes fixed on the picture. Yet another occasion is the account of a blind beggar who lived in Caposile who played most charmingly on the flute. Seeing him one day at the gate of the convent, Gerard begged him to play a well-known Italian song, "In all things, O my God, I wish your will, not my own." Immediately, a rapture of divine love seized upon the holy religious, and he began to leap, repeating the words, "Your will, O my God, and not mine." Then, suddenly raising his eyes toward heaven, he was elevated in the air with the swiftness of an arrow, and there remained for some time ravished in ecstasy. This reversal of the laws of gravity, this supernatural agility, took the shape even of an ecstatic flight. Gerard was returning one day to Ilicito with 2 young companions. As they were passing before a chapel dedicated to the Blessed Virgin, he turned the conversation to that tender and compassionate mother. Then he took a pencil and wrote, I know not what, on a scrap of paper, which he tossed up in the air as if it were a letter. At the same moment, his 2 companions beheld him rise in the air and fly with the rapidity and lightness of a bird to a distance of over 3/4 of a mile. Afterwards, they never ceased to recount this prodigious fact of which they had been witnesses. There were other times that the servant of God was favored with ecstatic flight. A pious person named Rosaria loved to relate that she had seen him one day carried up like a feather through the air, his arms extended. He flew thus for over 3/4 of a mile, hastening to the convent to which he was called, no doubt, by some exercise of rule or some desire of the superior. It is an intense love for God that draws the saints ever closer to him. In the last months of his life, Gerard sometimes heaved such sighs as to attract upon himself looks of astonishment. Father Cajon reproved him for thus drawing attention to himself, at which Gerard took the good father's hand and laid it upon his heart. The beating was so violent that after a few moments the father asked him then how he was able to thus endure it. On a similar occasion, Gerard said to Dr. Santorelli, "If I were on a mountain, it seems to me that I would set fire to the world with these flames of love." Then he took the doctor's hand and placed it upon his heart, which was beating with an unheard of fury, as if it were about to leap out of his breast.